Bixby Superintendent Rob Miller, you are running for state superintendent to erase Ryan Walters from leading our state's kids into the garbage can, basically. That's how I see it.
Well, and I understand that perspective for sure. But honestly, and I've said this to multiple people, I'm not running against Ryan Walters. I'm really running for kids in Oklahoma and families of Oklahoma who recognize that education's not where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And we want to see our kids be more successful. And right now, there's not a well-articulated plan for improving student outcomes or preparing kids for the future. And we need that voice. And as I mentioned before, there hasn't been a state superintendent who actually was a school superintendent since the early 70s.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's all been either politicians or people that have just made their way into that role. And so I think it's time to get somebody who actually understands the needs of teachers and what it takes to run not only a school, but a school district, and be able to put together strong teams to really bring the focus back on serving schools and serving kids.
Look, there's a lot to unpack. And I got to say, your announcement when you announced that you were going to be running has galvanized a lot of Oklahomans across the political spectrum. You've got Democrats, independents, and Republicans wanting you to pull this off. What does that mean to you to know that there's such bipartisan support for a change?
Well, of course, it's very humbling and gratifying. I've served the last 32 years in education, not with that goal in mind. My goal has always been to do the best job I possibly can, whatever that is. I do the one thing that I'll miss upon my retirement from school is just the opportunity to walk through schools every day and open car doors in the morning and interact with teachers. I think there's a negative perception sometimes about what's happening in our schools, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. What I see every day in schools is teachers building positive relationships with kids and doing amazing things. And I know I'm speaking about Bixby, but we've got fantastic kids, and I know there's great kids in every single school district in Oklahoma, and we're not talking enough about them and what they need.
So let me ask you, we've gone through a few years of Ryan Walters trying to gain national exposure on the backs of our kids, right? There's been so many just wild, just asinine things. I don't know if I can remember all of them. What was it for you that made you go, you know what, forget this. I gotta step in the ring.
It really is watching nothing happening. I mean, he's been in office now for 2.5 years, and we've made zero progress whatsoever. And whether you look at us as being the 49th ranked state or the 47th, there's really not much difference there. And the things that he's doing on a day-to-day basis are not helping that. In fact, from what I've heard, he's rarely in the office working with the folks at the State Department to do the things that are necessary to serve our schools. And so that's frustrating. And I know as a school superintendent, that state agency is critically important. They serve not only for funding, teacher certification, accreditation, all of the things that schools need as a resource so that we can do our jobs well. And right now he has gutted that agency. So they're not adequately staffed. You don't get responses as quickly as you once did. And that's got to be fixed. And it's one thing about trying to reduce budgets and reduce unnecessary waste. But when you're cutting into the bone, that's really important for school districts, then we've got to fix that. I'm frustrated just by, again, this argument that schools are adequately funded. The truth is, we know they're not. We're 49th in the country in terms of per capita expenditures for students. And you can see that. We don't have the resources. And so while our legislature last week were patting themselves on the back for $150 million in new funding for Common Ed, Texas passed $8 billion in new funding for Common Ed.
Wow.
So, and we're competing. I mean, we're neighbors. And so if you have teachers that work close to the Texas border, and by simply moving districts and get a $5,000 to $7,000 pay raise and better supported schools, they're going to do that. And that's a really critical problem we have in Oklahoma right now is recruiting, retaining our great teachers, because we all know that teacher is the most important school-based factor we have in helping kids. And we've got to do more than what we've done over the past few years.
So let me ask you, when it comes to your background, you're a Marine. What was it that made you want to get into education in the first place? Why do you see it as so important?
Well, let me go back to becoming a Marine. That was a teacher who made that happen. A chemistry teacher I had at Charles Page High School in Sand Springs, who took a personal interest in me. I was a good student, but I was shy and didn't have much confidence. I was from a kind of a troubled home. And so I thought about going to college, but really didn't have a plan for doing so until this teacher said one day, what are you going to do next year when you graduate from high school? And I didn't really have a good answer. I told him I was going to go to work at the local restaurant where I'd been working since I was 15 years old. And he looked at me and he said, like hell you are. He said, what can I do to help? And those 6 words, very simple, but he meant it. And so it wasn't what he taught me in science. He didn't tell me to just buck up and get it done. He said, what can I do to help? And then he helped put together an application for Marine Corps ROTC scholarship, because I told him before that I aspired to be a Marine officer someday. My dad was a Marine. And so we sent that all in about November of my senior year. And a couple months later, got notified that I got a full scholarship to the Marine Corps. So if it hadn't been for that teacher taking that simple gesture of caring about a student who lacked confidence, then I probably wouldn't be where I am today. So once I got into the Marines, I absolutely loved it, enjoyed. I was an artillery officer. So here I am, a young man in his 20s, and they're paying me to go blow stuff up with giant guns. So that's
who wouldn't say yes to that?
No, but served in Desert Storm and came back, and military life is difficult. And so my first wife and I, she decided she was finished with that. So I became a single dad at the time. So I raised a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old for a couple of years on my own.
Wow.
And I decided that I couldn't sustain that for much longer. It wasn't fair to them to be able to work as a Marine Corps officer and all the time away from them. So I got out and became a school teacher. Again, from that early lesson of that teacher in Sand Springs, I wanted to be somebody like him and make a difference for kids. And so that was 32 years ago. I'm half a lifetime ago. And here I am today, and have no regrets whatsoever. It's been a fantastic career.
Wow. That is an incredible story. It really hits home for me too, because I can relate in some ways. I had a teacher in 2nd grade that still stays with me. I can't remember her name, but I do remember that in the first day of class, I was new at that school, and what she did was she would put name cards on everybody's desk, as 2nd grade teachers often do, but she would put doctor in front of everyone's last name.
Oh, that's fun.
And so, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. Osborne.
Okay.
And, for kids who, this was a low income area, kids who never really even aspired to things like that, it planted the seed in them that, maybe I could do anything I want to do, and so I get what you mean, how incredible teachers are to the future of our youth, not just when it comes to the math and reading, but like life skills. And
you're so right, because I was a teacher for 9 years as well. And I've never had a student come up to me and say, oh, man, I remember that lesson plan you gave that one day. That was so great. It's always about how I made them feel, or a small act, or making the course interesting and engaging and fun so that they enjoyed coming to class and learning. That's really what it's all about. And we're not telling those stories. And it comes back to one of the reasons I'm running for state superintendent is our teachers need to hear that message of they're respected, they're valued, and they do make a tremendous impact on kids every single day. And we sometimes take that for granted. There's this false perception, again, that teaching's easy. Anybody can do it. Well, anybody can do it poorly, but to do it well and to really build relationships with kids and build that confidence and inspire them to be better than what they think they can be, that takes a gift, and it's not just something anybody can do.
It's not. And we've seen what it looks like done poorly, right? So I have to ask, what is your strategy to appeal to some of these more conservative, I'm going to say far right voters who are buying into the Walters Kool-Aid? Like, how do you plan to help them see the light?
Well, I'm a conservative as well. I've always been a Republican, but I'm also fair-minded, and I'm willing to listen to all other perspectives about what's happening in schools. And I'm not ever going to say that public schools are perfect. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that great teachers are in front of our kids. And if they're not great teachers, we need to do what we need to do to move those people into other occupations, because our kids deserve the best we can get. So my focus is not going to be on, I know Mr. Walters talks about the woke indoctrination and teaching kids to hate America and all that sort of stuff. And what I can say unequivocally is I've never in 32 years seen a teacher talk to kids that way or try and make them dislike America or not be proud to be an American. And even the religion in classrooms. I've been in our high school, I've been in our middle school, and I've seen groups of students at lunch and between classes that are worshiping the Bible. We have Spartans for Christ that come in. We have youth ministers. And so this notion that we're trying to push God out of our schools is also a false narrative. And it just perpetuates this, that we're trying to indoctrinate kids when it's not. We're trying to teach them and teach them to be critical thinkers and everything else. But nobody is telling kids they can't worship, they can't pray, they can't believe what they want. And the other thing we need to realize is those kids are coming into our schools that the way they are, right? So their families obviously know they have them for most of the day, and we simply respond to what's coming in. So if we have a student who's gay or transgender or identifies as different than what we might think, it's not our job to judge them or to diminish them. It's our job to accept them for who they are. And that's, to me, not a Republican or a Democrat value. That's treating human beings with kindness and grace. And we all need kindness and grace in our lives. And so, again, we're not endorsing those lifestyles. We're not saying that that's what they should do, but that's who they are. That's who they identify as. And I think we need to accept them as they are.
I mean, as a Republican, as a conservative, would you identify as a Christian?
I am a Christian, yes.
As a Christian, I really honestly feel that what it comes down to, Walters and some of the people like him are simply just using their power to implement their worldview onto others. If you have the ability to do that, to make everyone kind of think the way you think or to operate the way you see the world operating, why wouldn't you do that?
I think that's how we get ourselves in trouble, in trying to believe that we all should think alike. I think the diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives help each of us develop a better perspective on the world, because contrary to what some believe, and our social media has kind of guided us that way. So now if you believe one way, you can go to that social media, that newscast, and you can be fed the same messaging every single day. And for someone who, again, if you watch Fox News all the time, you're going to have one perspective. If you go to CNN, you're going to have a different perspective. But I don't see anything wrong with somebody listening to the news story on multiple newscasts so that you can get a better understanding of how different people might view that, because we all have a different life experience.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian because I was raised a Christian. But if I had been born in another country somewhere else in the world without exposure to the Christian faith, I may not be a Christian. I might be Islam or Buddhist or whoever else. That doesn't diminish the value of those human beings simply because they haven't been exposed to the same environment that we have. And so we have to keep that in perspective. And the whole religious piece of it, I'm all for people being able to carry their religion and being able to talk with others about their faith and their beliefs.
For sure.
But they also need to be accommodating to the fact that there's others who have different views, and that's okay. That's what makes us a human race. We're all different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're living in a time of such division that it's so hard to see that right now. And we have so many political leaders on different levels who want to expand the divisions for personal gain. You know, one thing I want to know is Walters likes to, maybe one of the reasons Walters doesn't enter the classrooms a lot is because he's always making his videos in his car. So if you're superintendent, how many car videos per week can we expect you to create?
Well, it's kind of funny. I was doing that before Mr. Walters, but there weren't car videos. I do something called Riding with Rob, where I'll bring people into my truck and we'll have a conversation about something going on in school. So it might be a teacher, it might be a principal, could be students sometimes I've had, or it might be I've had our football coach, and we just have a conversation. So it's not myself filming that. But no, I'd love to do some things to make sure that our teachers and school administrators and support staff know that they're valued. So if I'm fortunate enough to get this office, I would make a pledge that I'll be in schools 2 or 3 times a week at different places in our state, because they need to see their leaders, and they need to know that their leaders want to understand what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I can tell you what teachers deal with in Bixby, but I may not be able to tell what they deal with in some small rural communities or communities where there's a very small minority of people that attend college. And so there's a different perspective on those kind of things. And so I would need to inform myself. And the only way you can do that is to go talk to people. Can't do it from your office. I certainly can't do it from Washington, D.C. on various news interviews. So you're not learning about Oklahoma in that. But this is a diverse state, and we have to realize that there's a great difference between the Panhandle and Tulsa or Lawton, where you're from, right? So being able to make sure that we know where those needs are so that we can allocate resources equitably to make sure that every kid is given the same opportunities. And that would be one of the platforms I would have as well, is because if you look at Tulsa and Oklahoma City versus suburban schools versus rural schools, and with technology, with curriculum, all those pieces, making sure that we're doing everything we can so that all of those students have as equitable of access to all of that as we possibly can. And we don't seem to be having those conversations, especially when we're talking about the future of education.
So, sir, I've heard you say the word equitable more than once, and glass didn't break, no one fell over. I heard you say the word diverse, and the sky didn't fall. So why do some Republican colleagues feel that diversity, equity, inclusion is a bad thing?
It can be a bad thing if it's done poorly. But when I talk about diversity, I'm simply saying that people have different points of view and perspectives, and each of those have value, and we owe it to them to listen and understand so that we can better serve them as students. Equitable, that's hard to believe, isn't it? That equity would be a bad word. But we have to recognize that not every child who comes into our school has the same background.
Mm-hmm.
And in Bixby, Oklahoma, you could have a kiddo sitting in one seat who lives in $1 million home, who has a 2-parent home and has everything. They go on vacations to Europe in the summertime, and sitting next to another child who lives in a trailer home with a single parent who's working multiple jobs. And they could both be white. They could both be black. The race really isn't the diversity there. It's the socioeconomic diversity. And they're very different in terms of their life experiences and how they view the world, how they trust adults in the world. So we have to make sure that we're providing the support so that they know that they're equally valuable as that student sitting next to them.
So it's a wider umbrella than what the culture battles try and pick it apart as, because diversity can be so many different things, like you just explained, basically. I do think that, because of the society we live in, that we've lived under a society of racial constructs, that it unfortunately is important to understand those dynamics. But like you're saying, it's not the only dynamic to look at.
You're right. And I had the good fortune of working in Tulsa Public Schools for 2 years. And I still look at that from 2000 to 2002. I worked at Whitney Middle School, which is right behind Tulsa Hale. And that was probably the best 2 years from a learning perspective that I ever had, because I taught previously in a suburban district and with a different type of students from mostly affluent homes who, when I assigned homework or anything like that, they would just do it because that was part of the norm of doing that. And when I went to Tulsa, I recognized that that wasn't necessarily the norm, that we needed to work together and I needed to spend more time understanding where they were from. I use the analogy of every student comes to school carrying baggage, right? And for kids in some school districts, it's not very much. Doesn't take much. They can handle the weight that they're carrying, and that's part of who they are. But in others, if you don't take the time to help them unpackage and sort through the weight that they're carrying, they can't overcome that very easily. So you do have to spend the time talking about what happened last night, and did you get a meal this morning, and all of those things that help a kid feel loved and accepted for who they are. Because if you can build that relationship, because I did it with many kids in Tulsa while I was there, once they know that you actually care about them and you're not just another student in the class, they'll work really hard for you because they don't want to disappoint you. And then when they start working hard, they recognize that, oh, I can do this. It's okay to be smart. It's okay to work hard. And so that was why that was such a valuable experience for me, is understanding that not all students come to school the same way.
Wow. I love the metaphor of the baggage, because it's such a neutral way to explain how not everyone has the same start in life, or not everyone has the same tools to equip them. And so what are some of the goals that you have for Oklahoma, aside from getting us out of that bottom 10 ranking?
Certainly, we need to talk about student outcomes and student achievement. And the rankings typically come from a couple sources. One is our 4th grade literacy rates on the National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP test, and then our 8th grade math tests. We also look at socioeconomic status and things like that go into that ranking. So it's not really even state testing that has put us in those positions. But nobody, again, is taking that and saying, what does this really mean? How come our 4th graders on this national literacy test are not achieving at the same level as students in surrounding states? What are we doing well and what are we not doing well? And unpacking those standards to make sure that they're aligned with what our Oklahoma academic standards are, to make sure teachers have the appropriate resources and training that they need to adequately teach those standards to students, so that they'll retain them and start working on that. And we can't just wave a magic wand. And it frustrates me when people just say, well, just work harder, read harder, or that's not going to get us where we need. We need high quality teachers in every single classroom. We need teachers who have the resources that they need. We need principals who are skilled at coaching and mentoring young teachers, especially those with emergency certifications and coming from non-traditional certification paths, because that's one of the big challenges we have. We're never going to be a top 10 education state if we have 10% of our teachers on emergency certifications. It's just not going to happen. So we've got to figure out how to restore that pipeline and get great teachers back in our schools. And then the other piece of that is we've got to bring more people to the table. We like to point the finger at public schools for all the things that we're not doing well, but it's a bigger game than that. And we really do need to work with our parents and our communities and our chambers and our businesses. And this is a joint effort, because ultimately our students are the best resource we have for the future of Oklahoma. And if we don't develop them in a way that helps them be successful, then Oklahoma is never going to be successful. So this is serious work that has to be done. And it's hard work that needs to be done. But it's going to require somebody who wants to go to the office every day and bring people together and have these hard conversations and do what's best for kids and not be focused on politics or improving their national status in one way or the other.
It's about building relationships and trust back.
Right. And that's what I had to do in Bixby. That's what I had to do as a Marine Corps officer. It's all about building the trust of the people that you work with. And again, I like to talk in analogies, but as a school superintendent, one of the things that I always talk about is when your school board hires you, they give you two buckets. One is the finances, and they'll say, here's all the money that the school district uses. Make sure that you use it efficiently, effectively, that you're hiring the right people, that every dollar that's possible gets to the classroom to improve student achievement. But the other bucket is trust, and it's just as valuable, because if you squander trust, you're not going to be able to get anything productive done. So you've got to really protect your trust bucket with the same vigor as you do your finances. Wow. Yeah, because we all know when you lose trust, it's really hard to get back. And I think that's where we are in the state of Oklahoma right now. We've lost trust, not only in the current state superintendent, but some of our other policymakers, that they're truly focused on helping all kids in Oklahoma be successful, not just a few.
Yeah. So you care. And I think that's apparent. I remember the first time I came across your page was there's this viral video you had done. And I can't even remember what the message was, but you were celebrating your school district in the face of all this negativity from the state level, right? And after seeing that video, that's when I saw that you had announced your run. And I was like, hold up, who is this guy? I got to look into him, Yes. What is it? Is there something maybe from your childhood or an experience that you went through as a Marine officer that enhanced your empathy for other people? Because what I'm wondering right now is where's the empathy among our leaders, and you are someone who stands out as having empathy, and I'm wondering where that comes from.
I think I've always had an element of that as a kid, even growing up, just being concerned about other people and making sure that I wasn't just being selfish and focused on what was good for me. And we've gotten too far away from that, right? The competitiveness of people has tried to make it like it's a zero-sum game. I win, that person loses. Instead of, we can both win. We can both have success. And working with students as a teacher, I I learned a lot about how kids think, and that if you think you can just ignore the social and emotional aspects of this little human being that you're trying to teach, you're fooling yourself, because they're not going to learn to their potential at all. Serving as a Marine Corps officer too, I got the great privilege of having Marines from everywhere in the country and seeing their backgrounds. And the Marines is a refuge for a lot of young men at the time who didn't know what else to do in life. So they said, well, I guess I'll just join the Marines and give this a try. And to watch some Marines develop from privates and PFCs up through the NCO rank and see them gain confidence that they could do something well, when all their life they'd been told that they were a failure or they weren't any good. And to see that pride and confidence build, just like you do with a student in school. If you create the right conditions, almost everyone can be successful. But we want to take shortcuts and not really spend the amount of time that's necessary to really make that happen. So we can put in rules. It's really easy to say every third grader who doesn't read on grade level should be retained. That's a simple policy to make. But until you actually look in the eyes of that young 8-year-old and understand what he or she is dealing with on a daily basis, and doing everything possible to help that child, then it's just not fair. It's not a fair expectation. It's not, no child left behind, I think, has set us behind and left a lot of kids behind.
Ironically.
Right. For 2 decades now, we've been doing this and it hasn't done a thing. The gaps between the top students and the lower students is still there. And we haven't learned anything from this. And we've just caused millions and millions of kids to focus on a test-based accountability system when life is not like that. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who can think, that can be critical thinkers and problem solvers and work on a team and have initiative and all those elements that sometimes we sacrifice because we need to have higher test scores.
Which ultimately comes to the responsibility of the adults, not the students.
No, I agree with you. And so one of the things that I would want to do too is if there are changes at the U.S. Department of Education and maybe some more flexibility in how we assess students and hold schools accountable, I would love to see leaders across the state of Oklahoma, not just legislative leaders and state superintendent, but higher ed and families and business owners really talk about what does it mean to be an educated person in the 21st century, and how do we measure that? How do we hold schools accountable? Because they do need to have certain standards, but also have a system that reflects growth of students and the hard work that's going into that. Because right now it's, we've taken chronic absenteeism as an example. That was part of our ADAF report card.
Yeah.
In schools, we have some influence over that, but at the end of the day, it's the parent and the child who decide whether or not they come to school that day. But schools were beating them over the head and shoulders because we didn't have attendance rates higher, especially post-COVID. That was tough.
Yeah.
So I would love to see us look at a different way to measure the quality of schools other than just how kids do on a once a year multiple choice test. There's got to be a better way.
So you're tired of the status quo. All right.
Yeah.
Well, when can people expect to vote for you?
The first primary will be June of next year. And so we're still a year out. There's a lot of campaigning left to happen. Still don't know who else is going to announce a run. Not sure if Mr. Walters is going to run again or whether he's going to go for something else next time. But as I said, whoever's going to be in the race is going to be in the race. And I'm going to run as Rob Miller as a superintendent with 32 years, as a former Marine officer, somebody who cares not only about kids, but about families and about the future of Oklahoma. And if, again, I'm able to persuade enough people that I'm the right candidate, I look forward to doing that job and having my name not in the headlines.
For the wrong things.
For the wrong thing. Because I've got no aspirations beyond this. I'm 64 years old. If I get elected to this, I'll be 65. And, that would obviously be the last job I seek. But I certainly don't need any more notoriety. What I need to see happen is education improve for kids in Oklahoma. And that would be the reward for me.
Not about the politics, about the kids.
Absolutely. And that's what it needs to be. I don't know how this position has even become partisan, because it really shouldn't be. It's about education. And that's not a Democrat issue, Republican issue, conservative or liberal. It's about doing what's best for kids, all kids.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Rob Miller, Superintendent for Bixby, State Superintendent candidate for Oklahoma. Thank you so much for joining In Depth with Dion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion.